I kept thinking about the number that didn't make sense. The pump hummed low, steady like it always does. A soft mechanical whine under buzzing fluorescent lights. The room was washed in pale blue and stainless steel gray. I had my hands on the arterial line before the thought finished forming. There's a reason embalmers don't talk about certain nights. This happened on my 3rd month in the job. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. Not because of what I saw, but because of what the paperwork couldn't explain after the process was already complete. People like us get used to quiet. People who work near the dead learn to measure silence. You listen for what shouldn't be there. I checked the tag first. Name matched the intake sheet. Time of death was clean. Pronounced by an ER physician just after 2 in the morning. No trauma flags, no hold orders, no autopsy required. The body had been refrigerated a full 12 hours. Temperature in the cooler logged at 38 degrees Fahrenheit the entire time. Rigor mortis was present, but not advanced. Exactly what you want. I'd already assisted on over 100 cases by then. Nothing about this one stood out. I positioned the head block and elevated the shoulders. Standard setup. I disinfected the femoral site and made the incision. The trocar tray sat to my right. Cannula sizes laid out left to right, smallest to largest. Formaldehyde always smells sharp. That night, it smelled sweeter. Not strong, just different. I connected the arterial tube and secured it with a clamp. Venous drainage line went in clean. No resistance, no backflow. That alone should have been reassuring. I set the pump to a low initial pressure, 8 pounds per square inch. That's textbook for the first minute. The machine answered with the same smooth hum. No vibration, no sputter. The fluid moved exactly as expected. This was shaping up to be an easy case. Those are the ones you don't remember. I monitored the hands as the fluid circulated. Color improved evenly. Capillaries responded the way they're supposed to. No pooling, no blotching. I adjusted pressure up in small increments. 10 psi, then 12. I never rushed that part. At around the 15-minute mark, I checked jaw tension. Still set but loosening. Normal timing. People think embalming is dramatic. It isn't. It's controlled. It's repetitive. It follows rules because biology follows rules. That's the shared pain point in this job. When something violates a biological expectation, it sticks with you. The pump cycled quietly. The only other sound was the clock ticking on the far wall. I paused once. Just a second. The smell again. Sweeter than usual. I told myself it was a bad batch of fluid. Manufacturing variance happens. I continued. After circulation was complete, I shut the pump down. Power switch off. Clamp secured. Drainage finished. I removed the arterial tube and sutured the incision. Clean work. Minimal leakage. This is the part where you relax. The hard work is done. I repositioned the arms. Crossed them gently over the abdomen. Left over right. I always do it the same way. I stepped back to check overall presentation. That's when I noticed the drainage bag. It wasn't empty. That wasn't unusual. What was wrong was the volume. The markings were clear, graduated in milliliters. I stared at the number for a long time. It was off by about 200 milliliters. That never happens. Not after a complete drainage, not with stable pressure, not with a clean case. I felt my jaw tighten. Just once. I told myself I'd miscalculated earlier. I told myself fatigue does that. I adjusted the overhead light and leaned in closer. The hands caught my eye again. They weren't crossed the way I remembered. Not by much. Just enough that my brain hesitated. I stood there replaying the sequence. Left over right. I was sure of it. Now the fingers rested slightly apart. Not spread, Not clenched, just different. I checked the shoulders. No shift, no slide marks on the table. The pump was still off. The lines were disconnected. The room was quiet, except for the clock. That tick sounded louder now. I reached for the chart. Time of death. Refrigeration duration. Fluid volume infused. Everything matched. No one talks about moments like that, because no one believes us when we do. I checked tissue firmness again. The forearm felt softer than it should, just in one spot. That shouldn't happen. Not after fixation. I checked temperature with the infrared gun. The reading was higher than before. Not by much, but it wasn't dropping. That was the second contradiction. The third came when I rechecked the pressure gauge. It had crept upward, slowly, after the pump had been off for several minutes. I stared at the dial. That's when the sound changed. Not loud. A wet, subtle noise from the chest cavity, like fluid shifting where it shouldn't. My breath hitched once. Just once. I stepped back and picked up the phone. I didn't explain everything. I never do. I just said, "Can you come look at something?" My supervisor arrived a few minutes later, still in his jacket, coffee in hand. He checked the readings himself. Temperature, pressure, the drainage bag. He didn't ask questions. He initialed the report. "Finish the paperwork," he said. That was it. That's how you learn the emotional void in this job. Not everything gets discussed. I completed the cosmetic steps. Mechanical, automatic. I didn't look at the hands again. I logged the final numbers exactly as they appeared. No commentary. No notes. The case was released before morning. A week later, the protocol changed. No announcement. Just a new checkbox on the form. I still work in this field. But now, when I see that internal code on a chart, I ask someone else to take the case. The clock still ticks the same way. The pump still hums. And I still remember that number. Not everything that stops breathing stays still. The bag was still off by 200 milliliters. I stood there with a pen in my glove, staring at the line. Stainless steel. Cold blue light. And the pump was off, but the room still sounded alive. That low tick from the wall clock kept cutting through everything. I checked the arterial site again. Sutures were tight. No seepage. Nothing leaking that could explain the missing volume. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. I looked at the body's forearm where I'd noticed it earlier. The tissue felt softer than it should have. Only in that one strip. That was my first real warning. I checked the surface temperature with the infrared gun. The reading should have been dropping. Bodies cool in a straight, boring line. It didn't. It held steady, then climbed slightly. Not dramatic. Just enough to make my stomach tighten. I told myself it was the room. The prep room runs warmer than the cooler. That's normal. So I checked the room temperature. 71 degrees Fahrenheit, same as the thermostat said all night. That's when the second contradiction hit. Rigor mortis had eased. Not overall. Just in the left wrist. I pressed my thumb into the tendon near the base of the hand. It gave more than it should. That was wrong. Rigor doesn't back up. Not like that. Not after fixation. I stared at the wrist and felt my jaw clench once. Hard enough to taste metal? I didn't say it out loud. I didn't want the words in the air. People who work near the dead learn to keep their voice steady. You don't show doubt in a room like that. I tried to do the smart thing. I tried to be clinical. I checked the gauge on the pump. The needle had moved. The pump was still off. The line was clamped. And the pressure reading was higher than it had been. Slowly, quietly, like it had been climbing on its own. I leaned in and put my fingers on the tubing. You can feel pressure through latex if it's real. It was real. The line felt firmer, tighter. None of these things are supposed to happen alone, let alone together. The clock kept ticking, 1 second, then another. I looked back at the drainage bag. The fluid level had shifted, not sloshed, not bumped, shifted, like something had pulled on it from the inside. I picked the bag up and held it against the light. The fluid wasn't settling the way it should. There were thin streaks in it, suspended, fresh-looking, too fresh. That was impossible. I set the bag back down and checked the hands again. The fingers were not crossed the way I left them, not by much, but it was enough. It was the kind of change you only notice when you're sure. And I was sure. I stepped closer and held my breath. I watched the liver. Livor mortis is the purple pooling you see after death. Gravity pulls blood down. It stains the lowest points. Once it sets, it stays. This body had liver across the upper back and shoulders, normal for how it was stored. But now, under my overhead light, I saw a faint purple bloom on the front, high on the collarbone. At first, I thought it was shadow or reflection. Then it spread, slow, not dripping, not running, spreading, upward, across the neck, against gravity. Liver doesn't move. Not like that. Not ever. I felt a tightness in my chest, and I hated myself for it. Not fear, not panic, anger, because there was no place for this in the rules. That was my one frustration moment. It just didn't fit. The clock ticked again, and then I heard it. A wet gurgle from the chest, soft, low, not air escaping, not the normal hiss of trapped gas. This sounded like liquid shifting where it should not exist. A slow, internal movement. My breath hitched once. I took one step back. I reached for the chart. I checked time of death again. Just to punish myself. It was clean, signed, stamped. The case number stared back at me in black ink. I looked at the prep room door. I didn't want to call anyone. I did anyway. Because no one believes us when we say we saw something wrong. They think we're tired. They think we're exaggerating. So I wanted a second set of eyes. I called my supervisor. 2 rings. "Come down," I said. "Now." "What is it?" he asked. "Just come down," I said. He showed up in under 10 minutes. Still in his coat, coffee in hand. Like I'd interrupted a normal night. He didn't ask how I was. He never did. He walked straight to the table and looked at the body. He checked the hands first. Then he checked the drainage bag. Then he checked the gauge. He didn't say anything. He pulled the infrared gun from my tray and aimed it at the sternum. He waited for the beep. The display read higher than it should. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he aimed it again, like repeating it would fix it. It didn't. He leaned in and pressed the wrist the way I had. 1 thumb, 1 firm push. The tendon gave. He didn't react. He pointed at the liver's shift. Just 1 small motion with his finger. A question without words. I nodded. He stood up straight and looked at me. "Finish the paperwork," he said. That was the whole conversation. He didn't say it was wrong. He didn't say it was right. He didn't say to stop. He initialed the report with a quick, practiced stroke, like he was signing for a delivery. Then he walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. The clock kept ticking. I stood there alone again. That's the shared pain point in this field. You see something violate biology, and you're expected to act normal. I tried to reset my brain. I rechecked clamps, all secure. I checked the sutures. No bleed. I checked the jaw. Still set. I told myself it was chemical redistribution. I told myself it was pressure equalizing. I told myself it was a bad thermometer. I did what we all do. I started documenting. Time check. 3:27 in the morning. Temperature reading, higher than expected. Rigor change, localized. Pressure reading, elevated after shutdown. I kept it short, one line each. Every part of me wanted to write, "This can't be happening." I didn't, because the paperwork doesn't have a box for that. I looked at the body again. The liver had climbed higher. A faint purple stain now touched the underside of the jaw. That should have been impossible. The gurgle came back. One slow sound, then silence. I leaned in closer. I put my gloved fingertips on the chest lightly, just enough to feel vibration. The skin was cool, but beneath it there was the slightest movement, not rising and falling. A shift, like something inside was changing position. I pulled my hand away fast. I didn't want to touch it anymore. I stepped to the sink and scrubbed my gloves under hot water. Stupid, I know. Hot water doesn't clean fear. It just wastes time. I checked the clock again. 3:35. 8 minutes since my supervisor left. And the gauge needle had moved again. Higher. A small jump. Not a drift. A jump. That should not happen with the pump off. I stared at the needle until my eyes hurt. Then I heard the tubing. A faint internal click. Plastic shifting under pressure. I turned my head toward the line. The clamp was still closed. The pump was still dark, but the line looked tighter. Stretched, as if something wanted through. I backed up until I hit the cabinet behind me. My shoulders tensed. I forced them down. I kept my voice calm, even though no one was there. "Stop," I said. It was pointless. I knew it was pointless. The clock ticked again. Then the body's fingers moved. Not a twitch, not a spasm. 2 fingers slid together, slow and controlled, like someone closing a book. Just enough to change the hand position. Just enough to prove I wasn't imagining it. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just stood there staring. Because the worst part wasn't the movement. The worst part was that it looked deliberate. I looked down at the chart, at the initials my supervisor had left, at the clean official time of death, and I understood something. Whatever this was, it wasn't new. It had a procedure, it had a code, it had paperwork. I finished the report. Short lines, no opinions. I turned it in like nothing happened. And the next day there was a new checkbox on the form. No memo, no meeting. Just a printed line that hadn't been there before. Confirm livor distribution remains dependent. I stared at that sentence for a long time, because it meant someone had seen this before. And they didn't stop it. They just added a checkbox. The clock in the prep room still ticks the same way. And sometimes I still hear that wet gurgle in the quiet. The checkbox kept staring back at me long after the clock started ticking again. Tick, tick. The prep room was washed in pale gray and dull steel. I slid the chart into its sleeve with gloved hands that felt heavier than before. That morning, I finalized the report the same way I always do. Time logged, temperature recorded, disposition marked routine, no annotations, no side notes, no explanations. On paper, the case was clean. I signed where I was supposed to sign. I initialed where I was told to initial. The system accepted it without complaint. That's how you learn the real rule of this work. Not every anomaly is an error. Some are instructions. I stripped the table and disinfected the surface. Bleach solution mixed fresh. 10 minutes of contact time. Wipe, then rinse. The instruments went back into their trays. Cannulas aligned. Trocar cleaned and capped. Nothing out of place. By the book. The body was transferred before sunrise. Earlier than protocol allowed. No explanation given. Transport arrived with a new form I hadn't seen before. Same layout, different code at the top. I noticed it because the number was wrong. Too short, too clean. I asked the driver about it. Just a system update, he said. That was the first reveal. This wasn't a one-off. The body left the building at 6:14 in the morning. Officially, nothing unusual had occurred. I went home after my shift, showered longer than normal, scrubbed under my nails twice. The water ran hot. I didn't feel it. I slept for 3 hours. Woke up with the image of that checkbox still in my head. Confirmed liver distribution remains dependent. That line didn't exist yesterday. I came back the next night. Same clock, same tick. The prep room smelled normal again. Sharp, chemical. I checked the cooler logs. Everything was within range. 38 degrees Fahrenheit steady. Rigor timing on new intakes matched expectations. No anomalies. But the paperwork had changed. There were new fields, small ones, easy to miss if you weren't looking. A second confirmation for temperature trend. A note about localized softness. A box for pressure variance. They never announced it. That's the shared identity in this work. People who work near the dead notice quiet changes. I asked one of the older embalmers about the new fields. He didn't look at me. Just fill them in, he said. That was the conversation. I learned not to ask. Weeks passed, then months. The case faded the way most things do. Not gone, just buried under routine. Until I saw the code again. It was printed at the top of a new chart. Same short sequence, same spacing. I felt a hesitation then. A brief pause with the file in my hand. I checked the intake details. Different name, different age, different hospital. Same code. I closed the folder and set it back down. Switch me, I said to the supervisor on duty. He glanced at the chart. No problem, he said. No questions. That was the second reveal. Avoidance was now procedural. Over time, I noticed the pattern. Cases with that code moved faster. Less discussion. Shorter prep windows. They were always pronounced clean, always refrigerated correctly, always uncomplicated on paper. And yet the forms were heavier. I kept doing my job because that's what we do. We follow steps. We respect timelines. We don't improvise. But something had violated a biological expectation that night. And once you see that, you never fully unsee it. I started paying attention to others. Their body language. Their silence. No one joked around those cases. No one lingered in the room. I overheard a pathologist once. Just 2 words. Another one. That was it. I felt my breath hitch once. Sharp and quick. Then it passed. I didn't say anything. Because no one believes us when we say the rules bend. The third reveal came at a conference in Ohio. State-level training, mandatory attendance, breakout room, coffee that tasted burned, name tags clipped crooked. I saw my old supervisor across the room, the one who initialed the report. We made small talk, weather, budget cuts. I mentioned the night. Do you remember that case, I asked? He looked at me for a long second. I don't remember that one, he said. His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. They trembled slightly as he adjusted his badge. That was all I needed. The session ended. Chairs scraped, people stood. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the quiet. I went back to work the next week. Same routines, same instruments. But now, when I see that code, I don't hesitate anymore. I decline the case. I say I'm booked. I say I'm behind. I say anything that fits. No one argues. The system accommodates. That's the emotional void of this profession. We don't get confirmation. We get compliance. Late one night, I stayed after my shift, just to look. I pulled an archived file from storage. Old cases, yellowed pages. The code appeared sporadically, years back. Same short sequence, same extra fields, same quiet handling. I flipped through one report and stopped. There it was again. Confirm livor distribution remains dependent. I clenched my jaw once. Hard. Then released it. The frustration wasn't fear. It was understanding. This had been happening longer than I'd been alive. I put the file back where I found it. The clock ticked on. Every once in a while, I still hear that sound from the prep room. Not the gurgle, not the movement. Just the ticking. Counting. I still work as an embalmer. I still follow protocol. I just avoid certain cases now. I still don't talk about what happened that night. Not because I don't remember it, but because the paperwork says it never did. If you work anywhere near death, you already know why some cases never get talked about. If this story made you uncomfortable, good. That means you were listening. If you've seen something in your job that never made it into the paperwork, leave a comment, even if you can't explain it. I read every single one. If you want more stories like this from people who were actually there, subscribe. And if you know someone who thinks the dead always stay still, share this with them. I'll see you in the next case.